Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight to meet Floyd County's state level House and Senate candidates running for office in the November 8th election. This might be the ideal time to silence or put on stun your cell phones if you haven't already done so.
I better just, it's on my picture.
Tonight's forum is being sponsored by the Charles City branch of the American Association of University Women and the Charles City Area Chamber of Commerce. My name is Tony Noah, and I will be serving as forum moderator. The candidates for election are running from House District 58, Republican Danae Lundberg.
What?
No.
Democrat Danae Lundberg. I don't know which one would be more insulting. Republican Charlie Thompson. Running from Iowa Senate District 29, Republican, do I have that right? Sandy Salmon, and Democrat Ken Wolf. The candidates will have 1 minute for introductory remarks. Following that, they will have an opportunity to respond to questions. The response will also be limited to 1 minute. At the end of the forum, they will each have time for closing comments. The next line says, please hold your applause until the end of the forum. Since this is a forum, not a debate or press conference, tonight's questions are selected from those submitted in advance to the chamber office or to those submitted in writing during the forum. If you would like to submit a question, please raise your hand and Mark Wicks will bring you a pencil and paper. Write your question and give it to Mark sometime before 7:30 this evening. All questions submitted will be or have been considered. The questions presented are selected on the basis of how well they cover a wide range of issues, and they may be combined with other questions addressing similar topics. It has long been the forum's practice that only questions that can reasonably be answered by every candidate for an office will be used. That restriction sometimes causes us to eliminate a few questions. We encourage you to pose any of those directly and individually to the candidates. Tonight's timekeeper is Marilee Monroe. She has signs that let the candidates know when they're nearing the end of their allotted time and when they're expected to stop talking. The candidates understand that since the forum is scheduled to last for only 1 hour, they must be conscientious about observing time constraints. And now, if there are no questions from the candidates, we will begin with opening remarks, and we'll begin on the left and move along this way.
Thank you. I'm very seldom on the left, so my name is Charlie Thompson. Thank you to everybody who's organized this. And I was about ready to congratulate Danae on switching parties, but I guess it's really a pleasure. Can you hear me now? Is that better? It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Charles City is just about my favorite place in the world. Northeast Iowa has a lot going for it. The reason I'm running is I'm concerned about the future. I think we all are. We live in some very interesting, maybe challenging and perilous in some senses, times. I would like to see Iowa move forward and meet the challenges. Tonight I hope we get through the main issues. And thanks again for allowing me to be here.
Good evening, and thank you to all involved in sponsoring tonight's forum. If you'd asked me a few months ago if I would ever be running for public office, my answer would have been no, it's nowhere in my DNA. I'm a hard worker behind the scenes, but I'm not comfortable being up front. The last time I was a candidate was in the fall of 1978 in a contest that had absolutely no significance in my life, homecoming queen. This election is significant. It matters not only to me, but to each person in this room. Since July, I have knocked on thousands of doors and visited with thousands of voters. Voters want a representative that is like them, a representative with an understanding of local issues, a representative that will make decisions based on experience and factual information, a fiscally responsible representative with integrity. I am that representative. Here's what I found.
Thank you very much for inviting me and asking me to be here and join this event. Appreciate that. I'm new to Charles City. I've been getting acquainted with Charles City and its people for the last several months. And so I will just introduce you a little bit to myself. I live with my husband Matt on an acreage in rural Janesville, and we've lived in Northeast Iowa for 30 years. I was raised on our family's farm in Northwest Iowa. I graduated from UNI in 1977 and served as an officer in the Marine Corps until 1980. My husband Matt is retired from the Iowa Army National Guard, and I was a home educator. We have 3 sons, and we homeschooled them through high school, and now they have families of their own. This year I'm running for Iowa Senate District number 29, which covers Bremer, Butler, Chickasaw, and most of Floyd counties.
Thank you, AAW and Charles City Chamber of Commerce for having this opportunity. I'm Jen Wolf. I'm from Waverly, Iowa. I started advocating for policy change approximately 12 years ago when I had to get my first wheelchair through Medicare, and Medicare said, you don't qualify for that because you just need to get around your own home. And I said, there's something wrong with that. And I found a scholarship to go to DC, and I've been really passionate about creating change for all Iowans, including those with disabilities, for the last 12 years. As an occupational therapist, my goal was to listen to the patient. Listen to the patient, figure out what was going on, get to the core of the problem. That is what I would like to bring to the Senate, is really listening to the constituents and bringing those issues to the Senate. Thank you for considering your vote this fall.
Thank you all. We're going to start out the question. Today you'll get the first question. What is your position on legislation regarding abortion and reproductive choice?
I am pro-choice. I don't believe that the government should intervene in a woman's right to choose her health care. Do I believe abortion should be used as a method of birth control? Absolutely not. What we need to do is to increase access to affordable women's reproductive health care and the availability of education programs for men, women, and teens. We need to take the government out of women's health care. It's a very private and oftentimes a very painful issue.
Charlie?
Can you hear me? I am pro-life, meaning that I believe life begins at conception. In terms of legislation, I think we're in a rather unclear, uncertain spot because of the Dobbs ruling and because of the currently pending Supreme Court cases in Iowa. When we look at what the legislation should be, our first stop has to be the Iowa Constitution. We are finally having a discussion about abortion that we should have had in 1974, which is what are the rights of the parties involved. We need to look at what protections, what due process protections and equal protection protections there are for the newly conceived life. So I think it's incumbent on us to have the debate. I am pro-life. I want to have the debate, and I will. Thank you.
Sandy?
Thank you. I'm pro-life. I've always been pro-life. I've advocated for the rights for the unborn for many years in the legislature, and that's what I would continue to do. I believe the unborn have a right to life which cannot be infringed. The Declaration of Independence says that that is a self-evident truth, that we have the right to life. And so that's what I would continue to advocate for. Right now, just to let you know where things are at, the governor has asked that the courts lift the injunction against the heartbeat bill and allow the heartbeat law to go into effect. And so we are anxiously waiting to see how the courts rule and whether they hold an undue burden standard or a
Thank you, Sandy.
rational basis.
Jen?
I'm like Danae, I am pro-choice. I believe that there is so much context around each person's individual decision-making around this that just, it shouldn't be legislated. It belongs between the family, it belongs to the doctor, and potentially a spiritual or religious person. That being said, it's a slippery slope. If we start legislating this, it scares me because eugenics wasn't that far off. We're only 40 to 70 years away from eugenics laws being, which eugenics is when you start sterilizing people. And that impacts my community, people with disabilities, more than it does other communities. And that, it scares me to see that so closely being considered again. I guess that's all I have.
Charlie, the next question will begin with you. With the surplus money at the state level, do you think that public schools should receive more funding?
That's a difficult question to answer the way it's phrased. We need to provide adequate funding for public schools. I'm a supporter of school choice, which I think is a good way to improve the overall condition of schools in Iowa. I think the goal should be to have education in Iowa be the very best in the country, returning it to where it is, or where it was at one point. I support the public schools, but I think we need to have some alternatives. As far as taking the surplus toward it, I don't think it's a very smart move to say, let's just throw money at education. There is a provable inverse correlation between just throwing money at things at the government level and improvements in what you want to be improved. So if there's a shortfall, we need to look at it. Thank you.
Sandy?
Can you repeat that again? I didn't quite.
Yes, if I can find it. Here we go. With the surplus money at the state level, do you think that public schools should receive more funding?
Well, we have increased public funding for public schools every year that I've been in office. It's seen an increase of $1 billion over the last decade. So we have been doing that and likely will continue to do that. The question has always been how much. And we have to think about the goal of what our money does. Is it to put more in the system, or is it to improve the education of the child? And this is where I think striking out with a school choice initiative would take us in a different direction and give us an opportunity to have families pick out what would be the best educational option for their child. Thank you.
Jen?
I agree that they've increased in funding in the last 10 years, but it's not been to the degree that the schools have asked. They've been asked at 4%, and it's been less than that for the last 10 years. Schools are desperate. Our school systems have gone from number one, in the country to number 24. There's a correlation there. If we're not investing in our future and in our kiddos, how are we going to invest in Iowa? And I truly believe that the money, the surplus money, some of that should be going towards education. We haven't been investing enough into our teachers, into our schools, into bringing trust back into our schools and believing that our children are worth investment in.
Danae?
I believe that public schools are the heart of our communities. When we don't fund public schools at a level that's needed, we see them continuing to struggle to meet the demands of their students and the community. I believe that the budget surplus should be used in part for public education. One of the things we need to do is address the discrepancy in pay between public educators or teachers in general and others that are equally educated. There's a 20% discrepancy in the rate of pay. We have 7 of the last 8 years, we have the state's new investment in public schools has been the lowest in Iowa's history. So you can't say that you support schools when you continue year after year to underfund them.
Okay, the next question, we'll start with Sandy, and it's kind of a follow-up on what we've been talking about. More and more Iowans are choosing to educate their children privately. Many of these parents do not want vouchers either, but would like to keep their tax dollars for their own children. Do you favor a state voucher system, today's method, or a different alternative?
Thank you. The system that the governor has proposed is not a voucher system. A voucher system sends the money directly to the school. What this is an educational grant program or a student's first scholarship, she called it, where the money goes to the family and then the family sends it to the school of their choice. So this is a program that would work very similar to the Iowa tuition grant, where the student gets the money, gets the Iowa tuition grant money, and then chooses the private school where they attend. Thank you.
Jen?
That is something that I hadn't really thought through totally, but what I do believe is that when we start taking money away from public schools, we start taking away from the value of having a very diverse population in the same school, and we are a very diverse country. We're becoming more diverse by the day. And I'm not talking just race, I'm not talking religion, I'm talking about ability level as well. And if we don't see that in our schools, if we don't see that, we're missing out on something. So I truly believe that the current system are potentially still looking at something else, but I don't believe that the vouchers are the right answer.
Danae?
As an Iowan, as Iowans, we've always had great pride in our public schools. As a public school teacher, I've spent 33 years in the classroom and I've worked with thousands of students. I'm going to advocate for public education, and I believe that school vouchers are going to take public money away from them and affect negatively our communities. And I think those that believe that the voucher program is going to provide opportunities for students in their lower performing schools to transfer to another district aren't seeing the whole picture. Lack of reliable transportation, health care, and other resources needed by students to attend schools in another community is unrealistic.
Charlie?
To answer your question, I'm open to any of the funding mechanisms that you suggested. One thing I'd note is that the recent Supreme Court decision, U.S. Supreme Court decision, eliminates the need for the elaborate workarounds that were necessary before because of fear of establishment of religion. And I support the Constitution, and support the Supreme Court ruling saying that private schools can't receive funding. To the point of public schools versus private schools versus overall education, the goal of Iowa in funding education is to educate children. It's necessary to have public education in order to make sure that every kid in Iowa has access to a quality education. That does not mean that you have to do it one specific way or have a monopoly on public school, a monopoly on all schooling being public.
Next question, we'll start with Jen. What are the most important challenges facing our state?
Where do I start with that one? For me, and the reason I'm in this race in the first place is the privatization of Medicaid. It has devastated the people with disabilities and their families and their caregivers, and the inability to provide that level of care that folks need to stay in their homes and not in institutions. We are a state that's been historically, we have institutional bias where we shoo people into institutions, and we've just gotten in trouble for it again with the Department of Justice at Glenwood Resource Center. We need to invest in home and community-based services so people with disabilities and aging Iowans can remain in the communities that they choose, live quality life and healthy life.
Danae?
I believe one of the biggest challenges facing Iowans right now is similar to what Jen says, in caring for others. And part of that issue comes with the lack of the workforce that we desperately need in our country. We need to do some serious looking at the wages that we pay and the benefits that we offer so that we can attract more employees to the caring professions, including public education.
Charlie?
I have a little different view. I think the biggest overall problem facing Iowa right now is the role of Iowa as a state among the 50 states. Our role vis-a-vis the federal government. And this impacts a lot of issues, the issues that were just raised as far as distribution of public funds and public services. We are often handcuffed by federal regulations that prevent the most prudent, efficient distribution of public monies. We need to be willing as a state to stand up to some of those overbearing regulations. And then just really briefly, I think we're going to have an energy problem in Iowa because of being part of the green movement and carbon sequestration and all of that. We have to have enough electricity and fossil fuels to run the base level loads in Iowa because it gets colder in the winter. Thank you.
And Sandy?
Thank you. I would say the biggest issue that we face in Iowa isn't always one that makes the headlines, but I would say it's the breakdown of the family. Spiritually, morally, mentally, socially, emotionally. There are so many pressures on families. The economic pressures to be able to make enough money, the breakup of families, the fatherlessness that plagues families, the confusion now that sets in with the role of family, role of mother, role of father. I think that has a tremendous impact, and we've seen increase in child abuse in families. Families have no time together, don't spend time together, and so there's less way for the, okay, I'm sorry, I can't finish.
Okay, then the next question, we start with Charlie. As we look at the cost of living, how would you address reducing costs for families while not reducing services.
The key to surviving inflation, I think, is increased productivity, which often means more efficient, or will mean more efficiency in government. I support zero-based budgeting from time to time. I think it could save Iowa a lot of money and school districts a lot of money. If we become more efficient as a state government operation, the tax burden is lowered and the productivity of Iowa industry and the economy picks up. Energy, as I was starting to say before, is a big issue for us. It takes a lot of energy to create fertilizer, it takes a lot of energy to run Iowa. And that's just a given, unless you're going to start killing people. And I don't think anyone favors that. But if you do the math, we have to have enough energy at a reasonable price in order to run Iowa. And the winter heating bills this year are going to be out of control. I think as a state, we need to look at how we help people get through this winter.
I want to remind you all that at 7:30, we're stopping collecting questions. So you've got about 3 minutes to get a question, and if one has come up, let Mark know right now. And Sandy, would you like to address that question?
Yes, I would say tax issues are a big thing. Iowa has has had high tax rates, has had difficulty being competitive with other states. And that's why we've sought to lower the tax rate, and with the recent legislation that was passed this past session, we are lowering our tax rates to 3.9% over 4 years and exempting retirement income. We need to attract more people into this state, and the tax structure affects a great deal whether people move here or not. And it affects whether a company moves here or not. And so we need to get that reined in, and I believe we can do that while still funding our public safety, our education and healthcare. Thank you.
Jen?
Well, tax cuts are great, and they sound great. They're also what funds our services, and our services are being cut. And education and Medicaid, which are two of the biggest costs on the budget. If we do not have enough money to fund these services, how are we going to entice people to stay in Iowa? You never know what's going to happen. You don't know when that shoe is going to drop. People need a backup. They need to know that their services are there in order to stay in a community and feel like they belong and want to be part of a community. I think it's one of the things I love about Iowa, is the fact that we are a community and we do support each other. And it seems like that is sometimes missing more recently.
Today.
Services to Iowans are essential, and like many others, we're struggling to make ends meet every single day. Wages aren't keeping up. Rising costs of healthcare is an issue, food, childcare, utility bills. We need to make housing affordable, and we need to lower taxes for working families instead of giving more handouts and tax breaks to large corporations, reducing our state income.
Okay, the next question is going to begin with Sandy, and it is, what is your position on the proposed amendment to the Iowa Constitution known as Measure 1, the amendment dealing with state gun provisions?
Yes, I'm supportive of adding a right to keep and bear arms to the Iowa Constitution. Iowa is one of 6 states that does not have a right to keep and bear arms as part of our Constitution. And so this is our opportunity to be able to add that to our Constitution to provide protections in the courts as laws are considered. So yeah, I would support that, and I hope that we can get that passed here in the state of Iowa and added to our Constitution.
Jen?
I'm against this amendment for the reason that we already have the Second Amendment. We have that in our arsenal. We do not need stricter scrutiny to make it harder to have common sense gun laws in the state of Iowa. That means what this amendment could potentially mean is that it's harder and harder to have common sense laws. So that's why I'm against this amendment.
Danae,
I believe we have a Second Amendment in place, and I am supportive of the right to have guns for personal safety. I think this issue is something that is worded a little vaguely intentionally, and an issue that I feel that I need to learn a lot more about.
Charlie,
I strongly support the proposed amendment. I think everyone should vote for it. I think it's a necessary bit of cleanup that we should have done years ago. And I'm going to have some extra time, so I'm going to go back to something on education. I am a highly satisfied public education consumer in Iowa. I never went to private school for a day in my life. I think I got a terrific education. And I see a lot of teachers that I had in this room. I think we are unfair a lot of times in the political scene to teachers and treat them as a football or something to a foil. There we go. And I think we should stop doing that. Teachers are, educators in general, make up a very important part of our communities, and we need to support them. And I think they need to be paid adequately, because often with professionals you get what you pay for.
Jen, this question will start with you. Is the use of eminent domain appropriate for the proposed carbon dioxide pipelines in Iowa?
That's pretty easy. No. I hear it, and that's not just a personal, that is what I'm hearing from across the district, is that people do not want the carbon pipeline, period. And if that's what Iowans are saying, that's what I feel that it's responsible for our elected official to respond to what the district is saying.
Danae,
I am opposed to using eminent domain for the pipeline. I'm opposed to private companies benefiting from using eminent domain to secure land and line their pockets with. So I'm opposed to that.
Charlie,
I'm opposed to the use of eminent domain on the pipeline. I'm in general opposed to using it for a private function to enrich people. I think that should be done on a voluntary basis. The pipeline, which I'm very much opposed to on other grounds as well, is a really bad idea. We need to work against it. I think it's dangerous. I don't see how it can be permitted, meaning go through the formal permit process and successfully. They have not explained a lot of problems with safety. The economic prospects of the pipeline are very unstable in my view, and that goes to whether or not they can provide sufficient indemnification and bonding to protect against the potential risk. So I think you'll find greater unanimity in this part of the world on this question. Thank you.
and Sandy.
Okay, well, the choir's gonna sing in unison here. I'm also opposed to the use of eminent domain for the carbon capture pipeline. I feel like it's, does not serve a public use, and therefore is a violation of the private property rights that are spelled out in the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and Article 1 of the Iowa Constitution. I'm concerned about the disruption and damage that would be done to carefully installed pattern drainage tile systems on farmland. There's been promises to return the soil to its original condition, but those have not always been kept. And so thus the proper soil conditions necessary for optimal growth of agricultural crops is threatened with that. And we should think about the fact that we're taking a known harmless substance, CO2, which all plants need and which is an extremely small percentage of the Earth's atmosphere, and turning it into something deadly. Thank you.
Danae, the next question will start with you. What is your opinion on how the state has been managed financially over the past several years?
I have had concerns with the taxation of the middle-class Iowans and the lack of taxation for those making large amounts of money in our country. I think when we look at the overrun that we have this year, the balance, the $1.9 billion balance, a lot of that money is coming from the COVID funds that were given, and we need to look at ways that we can strengthen our economy without taxing.
Charlie?
I think we've done very well in state level management of the budget. I think we can do better. I think you can always do better. One thing I'd like, as I mentioned earlier, to see implemented across Iowa in as many jurisdictions as possible is occasional zero-based budgeting, by which you start at zero and then you have to prove a case for each dollar being spent after zero. And I think it's a very healthy exercise. We haven't done it in a while in Iowa. It's been tossed around before. I think it's necessary. Governor Reynolds just got an A from a notable group. She won 5 governors to get the top grade. I think we're doing well. I do think we need to be concerned about economic development, especially at the lowest rung in Iowa. There's a growing economic underclass that we need to address. We need to have equal opportunity for everybody in Iowa, and a permanent underclass is not an acceptable way to run the state.
Sandy?
In the state of Iowa, we have gotten recognition for a number of different years for having a well-managed state budget. This past year, we balanced the state budget. It was an $8.2 billion budget. It was an $81 million increase from the previous year. This was enough to fill the emergency funds to their required levels, while we still had a healthy ending balance and still were able to fund all of the functions of state government, the public safety, Medicaid, education, and so forth. We were also able to put some additional needed funding towards our courts. Home and community-based services for direct care workers received an increase, and also adult and children's mental health received increases, and child and family services received increases. So basically, we manage the state budget the way you do at home. You have to set your priorities. Thank you.
Jen?
I'd like to think of it as if I was a business, it would be well-run. But we're not just a business. We are a community. We are individuals. We are Iowans. What I'm seeing from my end is people that could work, that could volunteer in their communities, are being forced into nursing homes because there's a lack of caregivers. They're still being underpaid. They were being paid minimum wage to average of $13 an hour. If we're not reimbursing and paying for the level of care that people need, whether it's at home or whether it is in an institution, whether it is in a nursing home, we are not recognizing our care workers like they need to be in order to care for our Iowans.
Sandy, this one will start with you. We have had several questions on taxes and various permutations. So this is kind of a portmanteau question. Take it where you want to with your view. If taxes ever have to be increased, should the increase be in income tax, property tax, or sales tax? Why?
Well, I don't even know that I agree with the premise of that question, but I know next session, there's a desire to take a look at property taxes. There's interest in Utah's law, which is the truth in taxation law, which requires local governments to tell the property taxpayer how much of an increase they're going to have in their property taxes. Not just the levy, not just the assessment, but how much of an increase they'll see in their property taxes under a certain amount that they appropriate in their budgets. So that would alert people to what's going on with property taxes, because seems to be a runaway expense. Thank you.
Jen,
In all honesty, I'm still learning about taxes and all the different varieties and the ways that things are spent. And I learn by listening to folks. So I'm still listening in that listening and learning point of just learning where they all come from and how they're differently used. I do believe that up until the most recent tax cut, that some of the taxation things have been good for the state. I think the most recent one of the flat tax 3.9 is good for some of Iowans. It's not good for all of Iowans. That's where I'm going to leave
Danae,
If you were at the forum last night, you heard a lot of talk about local taxes and property taxes, and we've seen that here in our Floyd County area, the increase that's happening, and a lot of that is affecting our farm economy, or our farmers. And so I don't want to see an increase in those property tax. I think that taxing people based on income is a better solution, and that's where I would be with that.
and Charlie.
Like Sandy, I question the premise of the question, because I think Iowans are probably overtaxed right now, and the government is probably inefficient in ways that we can increase efficiency and lower the spend. I guess I can answer the question kind of in reverse. My least favorite way to raise taxes is the sales tax, because it is, of all the taxes, most crushing on those least able to afford it. And it hits everybody. So I would like to see if there is a tax increase, some sort of way to help the least among us not have to bear the burden of it, especially in inflationary times, and we're going to have a lot more inflation before it ends. Lost my train of thought. I'll have thanks.
Okay, the next question, we'll start with Jen, and it is, do you believe that area schools are indoctrinating children in Marxist political doctrine? If so, where specifically is this being done and to what end?
No, I don't generally believe that. I believe that teachers are teachers. They are teaching to help kids learn to critically think, and where it is appropriate for each grade level. We have to, in this world is changing. This is changing very quickly because of technology and because of other things. We have got to have youth that can critically think and can think about lots of different problems in critical ways. That's hard. That's hard when we come with our very hard history, our history of racism. And we have to get, it's in our systems, and we have to have students that are critically thinking about how to change that in our systems.
Danae,
As someone who's spent 33 years in the public school system, I can tell you that a lot of what you're hearing about this is coming from social media. I am in the classroom. I know what it's like every day. Our public schools educate all children. We meet them where they're at, no matter what they bring to us. Their home lives are not always ideal, and we work through that. We use everything we have at our disposal to educate them, meet them where they're at, and help them move to the next level. If you don't spend every single day in a classroom, you can't profess to know what's going on in there.
Charlie?
Could you read the question again?
Yes. Do you believe that area schools are indoctrinating children in Marxist political doctrines? If so, where specifically is this being done and to what end?
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. I have no personal knowledge since I'm not in the schools, but I can't imagine Marxist political doctrine being a hot topic in 8th grade. But I think there are parameters that should be set for things that aren't in public schools. I think they're pretty common sense. I think most of the people in this room would probably agree on them. Teachers have a hard job. I think they're probably public schools are probably over-administered. There's an impulse on all levels of government to micromanage people who know what they're doing. And so social media, to Danae's point, can often act as a poison. And I think Doug Cam last night was talking about how wicked sometimes things are on Facebook. I think a lot of this is coming out of social media, and again, I don't have personal knowledge about Marxism being taught in Charles City High School.
Sandy?
Thank you. Yes, I do believe that in some schools, critical race theory is being taught, and that is very unfortunate. It is a dangerous indoctrination. Basically, what it does, it prohibits, it teaches that the United States is a systemically racist country, that people are racist just because of their skin color, and that people ought to be discriminated against or adversely treated just because of their skin color. Now, it may not be being taught here, but I have been made aware by parents in my district that they have seen those kind of lessons. So I think the training that we've known and understood for decades should be done, that racial equality under the law and tolerance, respect, and reconciliation between races, as was the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King, should be taught.
The next question, we'll start with Charlie. And Charlie, do you feel that the measures in place in the state of Iowa to facilitate voting are adequate, or should they be changed? Are they where they should be?
I think that Iowa has the best system in the country, and that's been substantiated by just about every serious examination that I've seen. I don't think I was perfect. The way I approach the issue is that it's extremely important to have 100% buy-in that an election was fair. And unless you have that, you're going to have problems. My preference is to have all ballots cast on the same day, unless for good cause shown someone needs an absentee ballot, and they should all be on paper and counted by hand. Grants can do it, I think we can too. I think Iowa's elections are fair. I think they could be more transparent and more rigorous in their counting methods.
Sandy?
Thank you. Charlie said it very well. I totally agree with that, so I won't repeat everything he said, but we have in the state of Iowa taken measures to shore up the integrity of our elections. Last session, we passed a law banning what's called sucker bucks, money being given by private companies or nonprofits in order to administer an election. Not for campaign advocacy, not to advocate for a cause, but to administer elections. And so we put that into place because that has proven to be a huge issue in Wisconsin in the 2020 election. And so we didn't want that coming here. So yes, there are things we still can do, and Charlie has mentioned some very good measures that we can take yet. Thank you.
Jen?
I believe we've gone backwards in the last year or two, especially, that there's more voter suppression that's occurring, and it's just that it's not as easy to access. It was getting easier to go and vote and do your elected duty, your civil right. It was easier to do absentee voting. It was easier to do all those things, which I think inspires people to vote and get out there and be involved. When we are cutting the times and the availability of people being able to vote in this day and age where people are working 2 to 3 jobs and trying to provide care for their families, I think having easy access to voting is essential in the democratic process.
Danae?
I believe that voting in Iowa is fair. I think the opportunity to vote absentee ballot needs to continue. I believe in in-person early voting, and I think extending the hours of voting is just realistic in our society today. I think there's checks and balances in place, and I believe our elections are run fairly.
This will be our last question before we go into the summary comments at the end. And it will begin with Sandy. Sandy, do you support legislative involvement in workplace benefits such as paid family, medical, and sick leave?
Well, I'm not aware that that's a state program. I believe that's a federal program. But I know that we have put into place measures to, for example, now if you have a newborn child, there's a certain amount of time off that you are allowed to take. And we just recently instituted that for if you adopt a child, there's now a certain amount of time that you're allowed to take off as well. So those are some things along the line of what that question's talking about that we put into place. Thank you.
Jen?
That's a really interesting concept. And it's part of the care crisis. It's why I'm running. We're not allowing for our working people to take care of their families, whether it's a child, whether it's an individual with a disability, whether it's an aging parent. We don't allow for that, and it would make sense that that would somehow be incorporated into legislation and into the workplace.
Danae?
As a public school educator, I've seen the impact of losing our collective bargaining rights. We need to bring that back. I have to applaud companies like Zoetis that are now offering a 12-week paternity leave. I know when my husband and I adopted our children, we got 1 day of adoptive leave. We need to entice more people to come to Iowa to work, and that's one of the ways that we can do it.
Charlie?
I hate to do this to you, but could you repeat the question?
I should. Do you support legislative involvement in workplace benefits such as paid family, medical, and sick leave?
Okay, as I understand the question, it's do I support legislatively mandating certain benefits from employers? Okay, generally, I think the government should have as light a possible touch on things like that. the reason is that ideally the marketplace will take care of it. People will be attracted to good companies that offer great benefits. I think there is a certain base of expectation that we have benefits that people will receive. And if businesses cannot provide them, we need to look at alternative methods, and the last stop is the government. The importance of benefits can hardly be overstated in this day and age, but I think it is something that we need to let the market take care of first, and then look at the government as a last stop.
This concludes the forum's question and answer period. At this point, each candidate will have a minute and a half for closing remarks, and we'll start with Jen and work this way.
I was afraid of that. I want to thank you for coming tonight, period. This gives me faith in democracy, right here, with so many faces in this room that are interested in civic engagement. That gives me hope when some days I don't. What I have witnessed as an individual with a disability and as a healthcare professional is that there is a level of discrimination that goes unrecognized unless you are personally impacted. I want to see more of a level playing field. I want to see people be able to have their basic needs, not bells and whistles, but basic level of needs taken care of. I see so many of my friends with disabilities that would be able to do so much more if they could just access a regular level of care in their homes. A lot of times it's 6 hours of care. They could get it if they were in a nursing home. But then, of course, I have a friend that's living in a nursing home right now that says her quality of life stinks. And she's 55 years old. She could be living in the community if she could access that level of care, which I think anyone, especially as an aging state, we need to be more aware of this and bringing more caregivers into the state, making it a state that people want to stay in and live in and thrive in.
Well, I appreciate the chance to visit with you and acquaint you with my views on the issues here. Basically, I'm a wife and a mother and a grandmother, and I love God, my family, my state, and my nation. And I feel very blessed to call Iowa and America my home. And as such, the vision of my nation that I hold in my heart is where liberty is abundant, government is limited, economic opportunity is plentiful, families are strong, God-given rights are defended, and the Constitution and the rule of law is respected. Feel free to contact me with your thoughts, your ideas, your concerns. I want to hear what you're thinking, and we'll take your ideas to the State House, and together we'll make a difference for the people of Iowa. This is who I am. This is what I stand for, what I would bring with me to serve if you were to elect me as your senator. So thank you for this opportunity to share this evening with you. God bless.
I want to thank the Charles City Chamber and AAUW, the Senior Center, and the student and Mr. Gassman that are here providing the technical support tonight. What do I have to offer as your representative for District 58? I am you. We share similar life experiences. I have worked in District 58 for almost 40 years. I've raised my family here. I've experienced the challenges of finding affordable childcare to balance work and family life. I've been actively involved as my children attended our local schools. I've volunteered in our community and our county. I've received excellent health care at our local clinics and hospitals. I shop in the same stores you do. I've purchased every vehicle here in Charles City. I've owned property in rural Floyd County and paid my property taxes for the last 32 years. Fiscal responsibility starts at home. I'm well aware that the decisions made as your representative are going to affect someone's life in one way or another. My decisions will be made based on factual information, not on an agenda given to me by party leaders. I will be a public servant that listens to the people I represent and does what is best for all. We need people in office that want to problem solve, want to put people over party to lead our state. I'm convinced that I am the right representative for the Iowa House, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you to everyone for showing up tonight. Thank you to the sponsors and everyone who's put this together. Also, a special thanks to the other people on the panel who have stepped up to run. So I can now say this from experience. It's not entirely a pleasant experience, but I don't have any regrets. One of the things I've loved in this process has been meeting not just Republicans, but all people of all political stripes in this neck of the woods. I've knocked on many doors in places that side roads that I didn't know existed. We are very fortunate to live where we do. It's a joy to keep meeting people in this district. And I can't make many promises because if elected, I'll be just one of many people with a voice. But I can promise you this. There's a reason I put a phone number on the campaign literature that I distribute. I will respond to every call. I think if there's a problem in politics right now is that we have been resisting for too long the tradition of consensus. We need to come together in ways that we haven't before or have resisted lately. We can do better. I hate to see all of these strictly party line votes. Let's try to do something a little better than that in this next session of the legislature. And with that, thank you very much.
This concludes our forum. We hope that you found it useful and informative. As citizens, we respect, admire, and thank all the candidates who placed themselves on the ballot and spent this evening answering our questions. We also want to thank the Chamber and AEW for putting together the forum, Jay Gaston for sound technology assistance, the Charles City Senior Center for donating the use of this facility, and especially we want to thank all of you for your attention and participation. There is campaign literature and absentee voter materials available over on the table by the door. And I believe that most of the candidates are planning to stick around for a while after the forum is over to talk and answer questions. We encourage you to vote in the upcoming election and to join us in encouraging everyone eligible to also participate in selecting their elected representatives. Please join me in expressing our thanks to the candidates. Thank you all, and good night.